When you get into this, you start talking about people taking your work. You also have like agents that are competing. Like maybe I don't want you to like, have you ever had agents like, oh, you use him, I'm not going to use him. Is there any of that or?
Not really. Just because I think there in the past, not the last 2 years, but in the past, there have been so many listings and not enough photographers.
Yep.
So the ratio from listings to photographers
has certainly shifted.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, there's probably 4 or 5 good photographers in Little Rock, and there's a gajillion listings. So I don't think agents can be as picky
as they used, yeah.
Because they're wanting good photos, and they need to list it and sell it. So they're not really as picky as who they use, just because they're trying to get it off the market and sold as quick as possible.
Well, I've learned from this market that photos can really change everything. And especially because like you've seen as well, these volatile markets create like insanity when it comes to the clients. Yep. And I'm sure you overhear things too when you're shooting houses about like, yeah, this house that you're taking a picture of is already sold. And now it's just a formality that you're taking these pictures. And then people make decisions based on the photos that you take, which I'm sure makes you feel ultimately responsible for the decisions they make. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about this, it becomes very important because you are actually photographing the house. And so how this conversation actually or episode came to be was Chris called me the other day and he was like, hey, from an appraisal standpoint, why are photos even, how could they be better for appraisals when they're professional? And I'm immediately like, because you can tell a lot better things about the house with a wide angle lens. It's kind of like a person. You get them in a wide angle lens, you can see a lot more.
I had one of those. I had a nice camera and several lenses when we sold our first house when I lived back in Sherwood, and we did our own pictures and sold it for sale by owner, and we used the wide angle lens. You can make it look really good.
We don't really like to talk about that time in Kendall's life because that was before he knew better. Anyways, nobody should sell for...
That I sold my house for sale by owner. I'm a lawyer.
We don't sell for sale by owner. He's a lawyer. Yeah. Anyways, moving on.
Well, I mean, for the past, I think 5 years ago, you know, when photography for like the last 10, 15 years has been a marketing tool. How can I as an agent put myself in front of or be better than the next agent? Mm-hmm. And so you use that a tool as your marketing arsenal. And it's over the last 5 years, it's gotten into video as well and social media marketing and 3D tours of your houses. And so there's a lot more tools coming out the pipe that agents can use to say, hey, I'm better than this agent because I have these tools available. And it wasn't until the last 2 years when the inventory went absolutely to basically nothing that I overheard an agent talking to one of the homeowners, and she said, I like to get professional photos of my houses, not necessarily because of the marketing, because I'll have this sold in an hour anyway, but it's more of the appraisal value. And it was kind of like one ear and out the other. And I was like, yeah. Wait, what? You know? And I, like 2 days later, I'm still thinking about this, and I'm like, well, who do I know that's a good appraiser, you know, or has a background or a decade worth of experience? I'll just reach out to Jamie and ask her.
Yeah. Hey, I was sure you were going to say somebody else.
I know.
What do you think of, how does it, because I know, you know, talk to me like I'm 5 here. The difference between an appraiser and a
agent?
No. Who goes in and looks at all the stuff?
Inspector. I was about to be like, there's a big difference.
We just talked about that.
As far as, because I know a lot of appraisers take their own photos sometimes. So what's the difference from having, or the advantage of having professional photos taken on an appraisal? And how does that affect the value of a home?
Yeah. So, and when he asked me this question, same thing. And when I'm like, that makes sense. Wait, what? And I like picked up the phone. I'm like, Chris, this is a great question. Let's have a conversation. But it really is like, it made me think, because we do take our own photos. Like when you go to appraise a house, you walk in and you're like front, side, you know, all these things. But the reason you're doing it reality wise is putting them in the report to display what you have inspected. And additionally for yourself, when you go back and look, was it asphalt street, concrete driveway, foundation, what kind of, hopefully you're also taking notes. Right. But the photos are just confirmation of what you saw and inspected. And I would think that when you're using a wide angle lens and professional photography, you can illuminate issues that might otherwise be hidden, and these defects that you can see. Even in a house I had you take pictures of the other day, you send me the pictures, I look at the back of the house, and this is the house that I'm like so proud of the crawl space, that I'm just like, what a crawl space. Let's have a dance. Yeah. I can stand in here. It's clean, dry. I love it. So, but I noticed when you sent the photos that it's like the water that had rushed, obviously it goes over the vent because there's a discoloration between the two bricks. There's the red brick, and then there's the brick that has clearly had sediment and soil, you know, go by it when the water rushes by. Right. And so immediately my thought is, I've got to explain how has this been alleviated? What is in place to help this problem? Because I can see that that's an issue. Right. Now, if you are a brand new agent and you look at that, maybe you don't see it. But if you're an appraiser and your job is to objectively and impartially value a property, you all of a sudden have more reason to investigate whether or not that crawl space has been infiltrated by water, whether moisture has been involved, because you have evidence. So it also opens up, though, for me, it's like Pandora's box. Like maybe I don't want to know all of that, because then I have to go further, and then I become Liability Island, and I have all these different, like, we're playing a game. I'm on Liability Island. And I have to call Kendel and be like, how much do I know or not know? Because at that point, I might know more even than my homeowner. Does my homeowner know that? Are they aware that the photos are going to allude to that kind of issue? So that's my first thought. But then also when you talk about market value, people are shopping for homes now 100% online.
Right.
So it's what you talked about, digital tour, the walkthrough, the pictures, and that is all they get to make the decision on. So I would think that that's going to play a major role, how you photograph it.
As an appraiser, do you actually go look at the listing online before you go to a property?
So all of it, you're supposed to, yeah, because the first thing you do is you sit down and
pull. So you would see photos there as well if they're
there.
Professional photos, and that may or may not affect the price. It probably shouldn't, but...
Well, and it's like this. So they used to not let us take comparable photos. Well, they always make us take comparable photos out in the field, but you'd have a lot of appraisers drop an MLS photo and be like, oh, I drove by and a person was outside. Like, I'm going to be straight, okay? Right. Some of you were never taking those comp pictures. Just be real. I was an intern for like 6 of you, and you are copy and pasting from Carmel's, okay? So woo-woo. I won't tell. I'll tell you.
Now it's public.
I know, but I'm saying I'm telling you in private. But long story short, I'm not. They weren't taking those photos. Right. They were snapping them out of Carmel's. And the point is, if you drive by that house and it has burned down and you're using it as a comparable, like that's a problem. So it became a very important piece of the appraisal process to take active comparable photos on site day of inspection. But same thing here. What if you can't take a picture? What if there's a person in the house? What if there's some sort of violation? Because that comes up with fair housing. Now all of a sudden you've got like pictures of people and pictures of their items, and then does that bring some sort of level of impartiality, objectivity being affected in the appraisal? You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's like this picture thing brings up a lot more than could we use photos for appraisal? Well, yeah, but you could also ruin the whole deal that way.
Yep.
Wasn't there a recent case where this happened, where the appraisal was like, the pictures from the appraisal, they ended up filing a fair housing lawsuit on because they said that their house was valued differently based on the pictures of the family that was in the house?
If there was, I'm not aware of it.
Okay, I'll send it to you. It was pretty wild.
What are the top things that will help an appraisal? Like what are...
From photo standpoint?
Help or hurt, yeah, from a photo standpoint.
So from a photo standpoint, I would think the things that would help your appraisal would be having those accurate photos of site as well as the property. Because a lot of times when you have an issue pop up with a property, this is Kendall's favorite word, external obsolescence, you will a lot of times not know about external obsolescence because this is something that is on the external of the property. So it's like, is there a cemetery next door to the house? Does that have some sort of...
Does it back up to the city's power grid?
Yeah. There's a house on... There was a house...
a logging operation 2 doors down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and here's a big one for me. I didn't know this till I moved to Arkansas, and this is one of the reasons they make you get geographical competence as a real estate appraiser in every new market, is chicken houses have an incredibly pungent smell, and the odor is very far-reaching. And the first time I ever drove past I thought I was passing like a...
paper mill or something.
No, that would smell like sulfur or something. But this was more like... I was like, are they storing bodies? Like it's,
gotcha.
And I'm coming from Southern California, and I'm driving down these country wide roads. All of a sudden, the smell of death approaches.
They don't have chicken coops in Southern California.
And the first question I asked my parents, I'm like, how does that affect your property value? And they're like, what? I'm like, that's a big deal. And then they were wondering, like, took them 5 years.
This is normal. Yeah. Welcome to Arkansas.
So I didn't have a real estate license though back then, and just for a fun story to wrap that up, they ended up putting their house on the market. I ended up getting my license to sell it for them. They had the market 5 years. I sold it in 16 days because I priced it for that smell. Yeah. It's like, okay, when you're driving out here, you're going to have a horrible time for 20 minutes.
Right. And what you just said is explanatory of what he's talking about as well with the photos and the external obsolescence is a lot of people are shopping online.
Yeah.
And there's transactions right now, especially with COVID ongoing, where people are buying houses that they never set foot in. Mm-hmm. And so it's very important from a valuation, inspection, and listing standpoint to have those photos of not just how pretty is my house, but what's around my house.
Right.
Well, and then looking at just like, and this is a good point for you as a, like if you're an agent or a photographer or either one, when you're looking at these pictures, do I have every corner of the house? Like for me, when I look at pictures, I want to know that I have pictures of the foundation, the roof. Obviously, I'm not going to get HVAC inside, but I know what the condition of the HVAC machine is if I take the outside photo of the condenser, I think that's called. But anything that I get from the outside is going to tell me, does that roof have remaining economic life, or does it look like it needs to be inspected by somebody? I mean, you see enough properties after time that you can
Right.
look at photos and say, great.